to Entrepreneur's Kitchen tonight. I'm really, really happy to have Beatie Wolfe at the other end of the line. She's in Los Angeles. She's joining us from Los Angeles tonight. And she's a British singer-songwriter, a very, very successful artist, and actually a universal artist, because she's not only really well versed in terms of her musical work, but also in terms of being a very innovative person and bringing music and her albums into tangible forms. She calls it the tangible forms. And we're going to ask her what she means by that and how she actually thinks about musical innovation. You know, Wired magazine has said so many good things about her. Vice magazine just recently said a musical, what was the word, Beatie? It's really funny that
yeah, so the quote was musical weirdo and visionary. but somehow people now think that I said that about myself, which I never, you know, those are their words.
Well, a musical weirdo, I mean, it's like, it sounds weird, but it's a good thing. So please welcome with me, Beatie Wolfe. Hi, Beatie. So this is now the official hi, welcome.
Yeah, official hi, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being with us and organizing this, you know, being so flexible about also the date and everything. And we were just talking about how your days are passing right now. So what does an artist like yourself do at times like these?
Well, I feel personally that it's just been a kind of great exercise in presence and gratitude. And I just have found myself appreciating a lot of life's little things that we often sort of take for granted in our busyness, you know. And so just seeing nature feel like it's more alive than ever, waking up to the birds, going asleep to the birds, writing letters. I've been writing a lot of letters and postcards as a lover of tangibility and ceremony and all of the things that you know. And just that old communication, also because our Wi-Fi is basically non-existent here at the moment. So, so yeah, just kind of figuring out, like, well, along the way, what are the things that we sort of lost touch with? And, you know, as much as we've kind of gone on this upward spiral of innovation as a, you know, species, what have we also kind of maybe missed, and what do we need to reclaim? And that's what I think about a lot with music, but also now I'm thinking about it just with life in general, really.
So do you believe that this time could really cause something like I heard this term a couple of days ago, the Great Reset?
You know, it's obviously it's a hard thing sometimes to comment on, because I'm so conscious of, you know, the devastation and the impact, and just people obviously feeling very fearful and anxious. But I kind of think that the silver lining, or the flip side of that, is that it's asking us to think about how we relate, you know, to ourselves and to one another, and also to the planet. And I think that kind of situation, that kind of sort of presence of mind, I don't know if that would have arisen from anything else. You know, it had to be something that gripped the whole world. And, you know, the interesting thing was, one of the major projects that got kind of impacted was this environmental protest piece that was about to be at all these festivals over the summer. And I kind of, you know, initially I was like, oh, that's a shame. But then I thought, well, actually the environmental impact of, you know, what's going on right now is pretty incredible. So I was going to do an art protest piece about it. But if we're having the tangible thing, then that's also, you know, that's also really a win for me in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, artists also do have to kind of eat, which is one of the main themes, exactly, main themes of this show. So what are you going to be preparing? What is your relationship with food in general?
It's, you know, it's funny because in addition to, you know, when you're saying how have you been spending the time, I've just been in a bubble, kind of like a womb of just writing and recording all these new songs, which feels so good. And you know, I wouldn't have really had that sort of time frame or that frame of mind in the same way if the projects had continued the way they were going. So having this kind of reason to just focus on that feels amazing. And when I'm doing that, I completely forget to eat. Like I can go, you know, I can pretty much go for a whole day and then realize that it's like, oh my God, I started at, you know, 11 and it's now 11, 12 hours later. So, but I do love food. I love, kind of, because my mom raised me and my brother very healthy, you know, no sugar, carrot sticks, all these things that are, you know, they're now kind of sort of trendy or in vogue, but she was very, she was doing it a long time ago and just being very conscious about food. So as a sort of rebellion, I then, when I got older, it's like all the ice cream and all the things that I could eat. So I do like, sometimes I do feel like I've reverted back to having a sort of very child diet sometimes.
That's hilarious. So like, you know, pommes frites and
Yeah,
fries and really tomahawk kind of steaks. And I don't know, are you vegetarian? Probably. I don't know.
Yeah, vegetarian, and actually I love it to dairy products, so I don't eat dairy anyway, so I'm kind of almost vegan. But you know, and then the thing is, if it's a vegan donut, it's obviously healthy for you because it's vegan.
Exactly. Well, you know, just follow back the supply chain. Well, so I have seen a package of granola, or was it something else?
No, so almonds.
Oh, almonds. Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I love almonds. Yeah.
Me too.
So you're just going to be having some healthy snacks.
Well, so the 3 ingredients I bought, so bananas, and some almond butter.
Ah.
And actually, you can make an amazing banana ice cream by freezing. It's incredibly simple. And I hate recipes. I can't follow any kind of recipe. I can't, and that applies to most of life. But you freeze the bananas, you know, overnight. Not in their skins. If you freeze them in their skins, it's a nightmare. So you peel them, freeze them, and then put in a blender a banana or 2 bananas, some nut butter, some almonds, and a bit of milk. And you just blend it up, and it is amazing. It's like, you know, the best ice cream.
Thank you. Well, we will follow that because we have kids, and I'm, you know, they're always like, we want ice cream. We want ice cream. Yeah, so that's great. Yesterday, actually, I did frozen chocolate kiwi things. I don't know how to call them. Yeah, so you can just freeze them. Melted chocolate with kiwi pieces in them, and and it's all over now. I can't even show you. So I will be doing cookies, coconut cookies. So some sugar, 2 eggs, and coconut. So that's it. It's going to be loud towards the middle, so I might have to mute myself. And just for the people out there watching our stream, if you are interested in asking questions on musical innovations of Beatie Wolfe, please tune in to Slide@Do. Our event code is 93416. 93416. I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting topics coming up. And I already have one question. How does one become a musical innovator?
I have no idea.
Okay, next question.
No, I mean, honestly, it was never, you know, everything I've done was never part of any plan. Like there was never a sense of like, you know, and actually I'd find it quite difficult sometimes doing an interview and they'd say, what's your definition of success? Or what do you see yourself doing 3 years from now? And I'd never know how to answer, because I realized up until that point, all the best things that had happened in my life, the things I was proudest of, were never part of a plan. They were detours, you know, they were off the roadmap. And I think that for me, it was just always being, you know, very clear about what it was that you wanted to do or what you believed in. And, you know, I discovered music really from a very young age. I started writing songs when I was 6 or 7, and discovered my parents' record collection, and I saw them as musical books. You could open up and read like stories, and there was the art form and the, you know, the ceremony and this whole sense of entering into the world of the album. And from that time, I was just imagining, well, what worlds can I create? What will my album feel like? What will it look like? And by the time I grew up, everything I loved had been replaced, you know, the physical had been replaced with the digital. And I'd spent all this time imagining these worlds, and then realized that everything existed in this very limited capacity. So I felt like there had to be another way, and we had to figure out how to combine the best of the old and the best of the new. And I just thought it was so obvious. I remember thinking, for the first album, which was this way of turning your phone into a theater for the palm of your hand, realizing that everyone was listening to music on their phones, but then thinking, what if you gave it a twist and it became like an 80s viewfinder, and you had this really, you know, intimate experience. And I remember thinking at the time, it was 2012, everyone's going to be doing stuff like this. This is so obvious, you know, this is where music has to go. And then obviously over the years, you realize like, oh, maybe that's just, maybe that's just the way I was seeing it, you know. And so I think it's about just following whatever it is you love and what makes you passionate, and finding that, you know, unique angle, and just really cultivating that, because that then ends up leading to all these things you could never have imagined, you know.
Let's talk about your first, you know, your first album, the first musical innovations you started with. How did the idea come into existence? Because it's something to think about, a certain, you know, innovation, or even not even an innovation, but just being very creative about how to bring your music into people's hands. Like, you know, what if we transformed your cell phone into a musical theater, and then you have this really cool thing with the, you know, hologram, and you see Beatie Wolfe singing for you, even interacting, but then, you know, making it happen is, I assume, the true pain in the butt, right? So how did you make it even happen? Because lots of people would already give up. They just think about, oh, this is such a nice idea, I wonder whether that would be possible. But then, you know, making it is a different thing.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think that when I see something really clearly in my mind's eye, I know that it has to exist, you know. And it's almost like there's no sense of, you know, even when there were real challenges with raw space, for example, you know, figuring out how to actually create something that was live 360 animations blending with that room in real time in a fashion where it literally felt like a Fantasia experience in, you know, the quietest room on earth. Then there were so many limiting factors or limitations, but it's like there's such a determination there. And I think on a practical level, you know, with, for example, that first album, I'd seen you know, I'd kind of come across something that had given me the idea, and you know, seeing this sort of these Japanese designers that had prototyped something, and I was having a conversation with, you know, a design team I work with a lot, Design.io, so I collaborate with them a lot. You know, like, look, how could we essentially create a 3D vinyl sort of in this fashion, incorporating this, you know, holographic aspect to it. And so it's almost like with every collaboration, there are different sort of, not strands, but it's almost like it's like weaving together these different elements, which by, you know, their collision make an entirely unique experience. But I think often people might just see it as one thing. It's like, oh, I have to figure out, you know, this one VR, you know, video. And it's like, no, I think that's where it can get a bit lost. It's about the layers, and it's about, you know, how you turn a room and a tailor and all that history into something that's also a musical jacket that is literally a jacket, but it also represents the album jacket, and it's, you know, your music woven into this garment that has these, you know, multi-layered this multi-layered sort of aspect to it.
And how do you convince your collaborators?
Well, that part's usually pretty easy. Because, yeah, you know, the thing I feel like I've been very lucky with is I've never worked with a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of different types of people, you know, so I'd work with you know, the scientist who picked up the sound at the birth of our universe, and we did the space broadcast together. And or I'd work, you know, with this design team, or I worked with Bell Labs to, you know, reinstall experiments in art and technology, the 50-year culmination. But it's often actually very few, but very intentional. And, you know, the majority of the time, for example, with the design team, it's really a symbiotic relationship where we're constantly feeding, you know, it's not like here's the idea, you know, how do we execute it? It's a, you know, continuous collaborative process. And then with, you know, things like Bell Labs, like essentially it's a sponsor, really. So in that way, you know, I'm very clear about having the ideas be fully realized, you know, and not getting taken off course, even if it means you're being unpopular because you're saying actually to 100 double, you know, PhD engineers, like, no, I don't want to incorporate that aspect to it, because it's not that, you know, I am right. It's that, well, in some ways, yeah, I am right. And I say that with a lot of humor, because I believe everyone is right when it's their vision, you know. And I think the thing that often happens is in collaborations, you know, it can truly be a collaborative idea. Otherwise, I think, you know, if it's your vision for something, you have to oversee it. And, you know, even if you're not an expert in certain fields, because that's what allows the intention to feel continuous, and that, you know, that the experience is fully facilitated by that intention.
Yeah, and when you find your collaborators, do you approach them with your, you know, with the vision, or do you already have a prototype, or how do you, I mean, because I can imagine that in some cases people can't even imagine what you already see so clearly in your mind.
Yeah, you know, with every one of them, it's so different. And you know, I remember as an example with the deck of cards, you know, I'd gone to see this company called Moo, printing company, and I was having a meeting with the CEO, and, you know, they were really excited about NFC enabled business cards. They're like, oh, you know, we figured out how to, you know, it was the first of its kind, you know, do a card that links to a website. And then separately, you know, an hour later, or half an hour later, he showed me this collection box they designed for Art Basel, that wasn't, you know, anything to do with NFC. It's just this beautiful, you know, art piece almost. And immediately it was like, well, you know, you bring those two elements together and you create something actually that looked like a cassette tape, and have that as an album, you know, presentation box. But it looked like a cassette tape. You'd open it up, you'd have a card for each track of the album, lyrics, artwork, tap that to your phone, and it would instantly bring up all the content. So it was almost like, again, it was just really obvious, you know. And so I did that collaboration with them, and, you know, I think they found, you know, and they ended up saying this, that the business they had the whole PR thing with the business cards, and it didn't connect. But what I'd done with creating this album deck, it captured people's imaginations, because again, it was like you're discovering a whole world of a record through what looks like, a cassette tape, and it has that tangible digital aspect to it, which sort of runs throughout my work, which I think is really interesting.
Absolutely. And after I saw your that album, after your presentation at DLD a couple of years ago, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I would expect actually every musician to bring out their albums in some sort of musical, physical way, but it didn't happen. It's interesting. So there are already a couple of questions here on Slido. So one of them says, when you write your songs, what comes first, the music or the words?
Well, it's, that's a very classic question. And and with me, it's, as probably the abstract nature of a lot of the descriptions of how these ideas come to be. With the music, often it's also very abstract. A number of times, and this is maybe 70% of the songs I've written, I'll get a sense, and this is very esoteric, but I get a sense something's coming, and I get my guitar and I record, press record on the phone, and I play whatever it is, and then I transcribe it afterwards. And a lot of songs will come with the words, the melody, everything all together. And that is the most magical feeling. That's what really also gives me a great respect and a love of music, because when you feel it, sort of coming through in that way, you do feel very close to divinity and also our humanity. And then sometimes I have a poem and there's something I like about the poem, and I want to set it to music, or sometimes I have a melody, but the majority of the time it's almost like they come in sort of already formed in some ways, almost like a block of clay where you have the kind of form of the clay of something that you can see, but then you still have to carve the details, so the song will come as a whole, but then I have to carve the details.
Which is where the magic starts to happen. Well, there are lots of questions coming in. So, are you sometimes worried that you might run out of ideas?
No, and that's a wonderful feeling, because actually, I think that's what allows the ideas to come in the first place. After each innovation, each record, sometimes people would say, oh, what are you going to do next? And now it has to be even bigger and more, whatever. And or they'd say, oh, now everything's in AR. This is 5 years ago. Are you going to do something in that space? And my answer was always no. There was never any sense of doing anything for the sake of it, or being nervous about an idea not happening. And then, as an example, I had the exhibition of the album designs at the Victoria and Albert Museum with the Bowie curatorial team, and that was a huge honor, like one of my favorite life moments. And after that, some curators from the Art Institute of Chicago had come to the show and had wanted to take it potentially over to Chicago, and they said, but maybe you'll have a new idea. And this was 2 weeks after the exhibition closed, and I'm thinking, no way, like I'm chilling out for a while, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this idea for presenting an album as a secret communication system using code pioneered by Hedy Lamarr in World War II, as this sort of 3D radio channel holographic sound experience. I had this thing came together, and I was like, oh, that's great. Yes, I have a new idea. But yeah, I guess I don't really have any, I don't try and hold on to anything. And it's same with the songs, sometimes the songs come through and I've not been able to record it. And I feel like, well, if it's good, it will come back.
And does that ever happen that you say to yourself, no way, this is just way too difficult?
With a concept, or no? Yeah. No, there's never, so far every major idea in terms of, an innovation, everyone has been realized, and
awesome.
has been, yeah. So and I feel, honestly, I feel, like very, very like grateful to be able to that has happened. And, a lot of them are, some of them are very out there, and when I think about how it unfolded, it's pretty crazy. And there's a lot of serendipity, there's a lot of almost like with the space broadcast, without realizing it, it ended up connecting me back with my grandfather, who had worked on the first series of US satellites for NASA, and which, I never knew about. My dad had never told us. And I ended up sort of almost following his footsteps from this experiment I'd done completely separately. So there's a lot of wonderful stuff like that. And I just think it's about, I think a lot of us have a ability to sort of sense, whether it's inspiration or, oh, there's something over there I want to explore. But a lot of the time the shutters are up. And if it's not part of, the plan or the time frame that we have, we kind of don't necessarily look in that direction. And I feel like when we keep our sort of sensory systems open as much as possible and our perception open, and you take those detours or you go down those pathways, if there's something that really excites you, it's amazing how that excitement just becomes this sort of self-perpetuating journey that often is, it fuels every project I've done.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about your projects, there is 3D, there is the multisensory experience, there is the musical shirt, then there is streaming music into the space, then holograms. So it's really, really cutting edge, and you do this kind of thing before anybody else kind of tries them out. And so when you see a new kind of technology, when is the moment where you're like, there might be something in there, I want to look closer in there?
It's a really interesting and good question, because I think with every innovation, like if you were, so the album jacket, the theater for the palm of the hand, the deck of cards, the first 360 AR stream, if you take them on the sort of tech innovative value, they're all very different, and they really are exploring every different sort of technological advancement. But it's so funny because I kind of didn't even really think about that. I was just always thinking, how do you make music feel multisensory and present again, and how do you give it the tangibility and the story and the ceremony? So I was actually thinking very traditionally, like, how do you make the traditional music experience come back to life today and make it feel exciting again? And I think when you trigger a different pathway in the brain, something people haven't experienced before, and obviously not going down the shock thing, because I don't believe in that, it's almost like it forces a sense of presence. So then people are present with that experience, and that's when I think it imprints. And the thing that we've been missing is the imprinting, which is so key to our humanity and our well-being. And doing the music dementia work, which about, that only reaffirmed how much music and art are so core to us as human beings. And so everything that I'm doing is sort of almost like it happens to be using some cutting edge technology, but it feels very nostalgic and it feels very familiar. And actually, you wouldn't even know that the tech was a big part of it necessarily. So I definitely like, you know, keep my tentacles out for like, okay, what's going on in that, you know, is there anything, but it's never really like, the technology never leads, and it's only about the experience and what would facilitate the experience. And so, you know, taking raw space, I wanted to create the closest thing to me opening up Abbey Road and the album art coming to life. So realizing that, you know, the streaming culture is like this, I was thinking, well, what would the anti-stream look like? And, you know, ending up in this anti-echo chamber, which was the quietest room on earth, realizing this is the perfect place for the anti-stream, you know, where no noise can infiltrate, and where you're completely, you know, present in this listening experience. The record player, then how do you make the record player that's playing the album as this anti-stream feel like a Fantasia experience? Well, you do that by having the lyrics streaming out, the artwork surrounding you and taking you into the world of each song. And it just happened to be, you know, first live 360 AR, but it just felt like Fantasia, you know, so.
Yeah. And is there a new kind of technology that gives you chills in terms of this artistic value you might want to explore more right now?
I don't, you know, this sounds very, sounds very, what's the word, counterintuitive for someone that has been hailed for their technological uses. But you know, I kind of, technology doesn't give me chills, you know, tangibility, human connection, a beautiful painting, a bird singing, someone writing me a letter, you know, those things, these really simple things make me so happy. Music makes me so happy. Do I get excited about an angle that technology can enhance? Yes, because that's why I've used it, you know, but there isn't really anything on its own that is just, because I feel like when you're just talking about technology separate from an experience, it's cold. It's like, well, it's just a tool, and it's how you're using that tool. And ultimately, like, it's the intentionality, and it's the narrative, and it's the world that it creates, or it helps to create, rather than, you know, LiDAR or AI or whatever it is, you know.
I really love that answer. And we have lots of questions here at Slido coming in. I want to repeat the number for the people out there who are joining just right now. It's slido 93416. Wait, who are some of the people that inspire you right now?
Wonderful question. When you say right now, I hope you mean that they are maybe no longer with us. But, you know, because again, it's like the orange juice for the ears, you know. I think you have the things that feed you, and you don't always have to reinvent that, in the same way that we don't have to keep reinventing stuff just because we can. There's some stuff that, you know, never goes out of fashion. A lot of things that are, you know, ageless. So the people who inspire me, well, life inspires me, nature inspires me hugely. Anyone whose intention is to leave the world a little better, and that can be from doing some grand thing or a tiny thing. It's just a sense of people that are working with, you know, pure love, really. And Jim Henson, you know, so my watch is, I don't know if you can see, but yeah, Jim Henson and everything he created, and Sylvia Earle, oceanographer Sylvia Earle, neurologist Oliver Sacks, musician Elliott Smith, poet William Blake, who was this I'm sure you know, but multimedia artist who combined poetry and art. And when people would say, oh, it's so radical what you're doing, I'd say, look at William Blake. He was engraving his poetry with artwork to give the words more meaning, and the visual, it was like they were enhancing one another. Hafiz, a Persian poet, a dear friend of mine, Ali Willis, who recently passed away. But if you could see the left wall of this room, it's full of her art. And she is incredible. And, just people that, I feel like people that are kind of thinking beyond just this present time, and sort of thinking, well, what can I contribute in some way?
That's so inspiring, Beatie. Now I know why I invited you again. Do you also write music for others?
I don't, and
why not?
Well, because I started off when I was so I started writing songs when I was 7, and I was performing them at the school assembly, and no one was doing any original. Everyone was doing Spice Girls or whatever. And again, I thought it was really normal to do your own compositions. And then I had a grunge band in my teenage years for a while, and we had quite a lot of offers, labels and different things like that. And I was writing all the songs, but I was giving them to my best friend to sing. And I realized it was quite painful, because it's like, oh, but these are things I really feel, and these are things I want to share, or I want to express, and I realized, Leonard Cohen is someone else who I love. And actually, when we were talking about the album Deck of Cards, his team and him, they were inquiring about actually adopting it as a sort of, saying, coming from me, but they wanted to adopt it for the last record. And there were other people that, were interested, but someone like Leonard Cohen, just realizing that actually he for me, no one can sing Hallelujah better than Leonard Cohen. So he doesn't have that whole thing of just of an honesty, and I feel like it would be hard for me to write songs for other people. I won't rule it out, but
That's funny. So is there a song that you couldn't finish besides your latest one that you're working on right now?
It's so this friend who passed away recently, and it killed me. And she was amazing, because she was a songwriter. She wrote the Friends theme tune through to September and Boogie Wonderland and for Earth, Wind and Fire, and then all these songs for Patti LaBelle, Neutron Dance. She was a Songwriter Hall of Fame songwriter, and she was 72 when she passed away. But she was also an artist. She was a physical, like a painter, but also she built furniture and conceptual artist and all these things. And I remember when we first met, it was like when you feel that you're the only weirdo out there, and then you find another one, and it was such a kinship and such an affinity. And I've been writing a song for her, and I did start it, but then it gets to me quite a lot, so I've sort of paused that. But I was actually thinking about it today, that I need to go back to it. So yeah, thank you for whoever asked that question.
Awesome. Online hook theory website shows the current most popular chords and chord progressions among all pop music of today. Would you ever use that kind of data to make music?
I literally would rather die.
Why?
I can't even comment. No, I would never. No, and I am kidding, but I'm also not kidding. Even when I was younger, And I had different people saying, you know, hey, can, you know, if we put you with this producer, or, you know, at one point there was this company that represented all these big pop stars, and I just was looking up at, you know, this room of all these photos and thinking, I would never want to, you know, it's not judgment, but it's like, this isn't the kind of music I came in to make. And, you know, for the pop side of things, I totally understand, you know, because there's always been a kind of idea of, you know, paint by numbers, like that's always existed, whether it's ripping off other songs or, you know, so that's nothing new. So I understand, but it's the opposite from what I think art is. You know, it can, that is entertainment, but it's not art. And when I say art, I don't mean that it doesn't have value. It's just when you see, again, when you go back to music and, you know, neurology and what music can do when people are unresponsive to every other, you know, stimuli, and then they hear music, and it doesn't even have to be something that's familiar, which is what the research project I did proved. You know, you see someone that's catatonic getting up and dancing. You see someone who's nonverbal singing along with songs they've never heard. And it's because it touches you deeply. And I think that comes down to the intentionality, you know, and if you take the two sides, you've got, you know, say John Lennon, in the middle of the night, wakes up and it's like, oh yeah, I have to get to the piano. There's something coming. And in that moment of creation, the intention is, I don't know, love, telling a story, uplifting people, communicating, you know, versus if you have 10 record execs or something like that software saying, okay, if you do this, then it will, you know, it will equal good or equal this amount of money, or, you know, the intentionality is totally different. And also, in addition to that, it's not our perfection that makes us connect, it's our imperfection. It's the things that you would never program in the first place. It's the things that, you know, on paper you wouldn't really do, and it's the weird voices, or it's the kind of wonky notes at times, or it's the, you know, playing with dynamics or playing with rhythm, and that is unprogrammable, and that's what makes us human, and that's why we feel one another.
Is there an instrument you would never want to use?
No, I think, you know, it's more like is there, what are the instruments I do use? Because, you know, the perhaps interesting thing is the you know, on the sort of innovation side, people might then think, you know, the music would be electronic, or, and it's not. It's very, you know, it's largely acoustic. It's in the vein of Leonard Cohen or Elliott Smith, or, you know, whoever, those kind of sort of songwriters. And in that way, I do tend to use, you know, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, pianos, strings, you know, so I don't really use anything. I don't really use any electronic, you know, maybe a MIDI controller for a Mellotron or something, but yeah.
That's really so interesting. So let's talk about some of the latest projects, especially the one with music and health, because I know that it's a very dear topic to you. And also, yesterday I had the chance to host Elliot Fisk, who is one of the famous classical guitar players of all times. And we talked about this aspect around listening, to be able to attend the moment, actually. So, let's talk about this aspect around health, being able to attend the moment, and listening again to be really present in here and now. I know that you have a couple of very interesting points there with your research.
Yeah. So what can I say?
having spent over 100 hours in the quietest room on earth, which usually would drive someone crazy. When I first went into that space, you know, the engineer who was taking me in there said that you can probably only stay in here 20 minutes because you start to hear the blood rushing through your veins, and it's, you know, very disconcerting for a lot of people. And instead I had the opposite experience, and I found it so peaceful and so calming. And suddenly it's like you realize all your sensory systems, all your inputs are so frazzled most of the time, because we have sound, not just sound, but, you know, information coming at us all the time. And sort of realizing that, you know, it almost was like going back into the womb or something. You're in this space where you just are really there with yourself, and, you know, listening to music in that space without any EQ, any auto tune, any technology, anything, you know, the rawest sound, a sound that most people would think was ugly. And I thought it was so beautiful. And I realized that actually, you know, when you listen, you're so much more conscious of what you bring into the silence. So it makes you really think, well, is what I'm going to say adding something, or is it, you know, enlightening something, or is it, you know, it's this process of really being very conscious. And I think when you're very conscious about listening, you're very then conscious about responding. So I feel like, yeah, listening is very important. But actually also anything that makes us present, because, you know, this idea of being alive inside, it's like anything that causes us to be present is something that is keeping us alive inside. And so that's why the whole thing of, you know, of music in the back, floating around in the background, is this constant sort of noise, along with everything else, you know, social media and news notifications and everything. It's like we have this background chatter, but we're not choosing to carve out these deeper, you know, moments within all of that. And I think that is so core to us as human beings. And, you know, the Music Dementia Project, which was actually specifically in the dementia area because I had family members with, you know, the condition. But you look at music for every neurological condition: autism, schizophrenia, Parkinson's. Every single neurological condition has so many amazing case studies where music has provided a tonic, you know, a remedy, a way in when nothing else can. So I guess it's just about, you know, realizing that it's interconnected with our well-being. It's not something separate. And it's not just music, it's anything that is causing us to really be here now.
Yeah, which can also be a very good conversation like the one we're having right now. It's really amazing. By the way, my cookies are done.
Wow.
Well, they're not the best looking, but they're very, very tasty. I'm also, you know, I don't even know why I decided to Entrepreneur's Kitchen, just to probably show that failure is okay. If you can just like dust off and stand up.
Hey, I said it's our imperfect nature that, you know, we respond to. So
Absolutely, you know, and we're almost at the end of our conversation, Beatie. I would, you know, go for hours and hours, but unfortunately, you know, at some point we will all run out of juice. So we have this tradition at the Entrepreneur's Kitchen about a joke. Do you have a joke you can tell us?
I feel so bad, because I was thinking about this morning and I was like, I've got to be able to find one joke. and maybe it's because I'm such a serious person, Seda. I don't know. Like, you know, the thing I love puns, like terrible puns.
you know, dad puns, but I guess I like the spontaneity of humor rather than like a one-liner. But given that we're in a kitchen, or given that you're in a kitchen, this was the joke I used to love as a teenager, and no one thought it was funny. I haven't told it in 10 years, so let's see if I can still tell it. But there are two apples in an oven. One says, "Cool, it's hot in here." The other one says, "Ah, a talking apple." So there you go. You got me telling the world's worst apple joke.
That's awesome. Hey, I'm going to tell one that's going to just make your looks look like the best joke on earth.
Yes.
Okay. You know, since you had a folk background, I was like, I'm sure she can laugh about this. How many folk singers does it take to change a light bulb?
No idea.
6. 1 to change it, and 5 to sing about how good the old one was.
I love, there you go, that's great. Yeah, I mean, that's the proper joke.
Yeah, good old, you know. Well, since I've been doing this now, the 31st episode with you for now six weeks in a row, I kind of, you know, had to build up a memory around jokes so I can just spontaneously remember one, depending on the field. It's hilarious.
You should write a book, a joke book at the end of all of this.
And the recipe book, actually, about how not to do things. Well, Beatie, I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was really, really lovely talking to you. You were so inspiring as always, and I'm looking forward to listening to your music soon. You know, also seeing you live in the shows. Hopefully this whole thing is going to go away and musicians will be able to you know, come and inspire on stage, and on in your case you can also inspire in the digital realm in a very, very convincing way. So that's really cool. Absolutely. And just stay in the line for a couple of more minutes, please, while I say goodbye, and then you know, I want to hang out with you a little more.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Guys out there, thank you so much for joining in tonight's episode of The Entrepreneur's Kitchen. And tomorrow I'm going to be hosting an awesome yoga teacher who is going to be talking to us about how to find presence and how to be at the center of our own universe, and how to really come to our senses to be aware of our body. That's Michaela Aue. I'm looking forward to hosting her tomorrow. So tune in and take care and good night. Bye.